All right, good evening. It's truly an auspicious day to be talking about nature's rhythms. This afternoon at exactly 12:57 Eastern Daylight Time, there was a really cool event in our solar system. The sun crossed the equator of the Earth, marking the spring equinox, when daytime and nighttime will be roughly the same length because the Earth that we're on is tilted neither toward nor away from the sun. It's really an auspicious time for this, because for us in the northern hemisphere, it means, of course, it's the first day of spring after a long, hard winter. Yay is right. So, spring is the theme, and spring, of course, is a time of awakening. And what I want to talk about this evening is, in fact, waking up to this amazing planet of ours. For thousands of years, humans on this planet were keenly aware of the movements of the stars, the sun, the moon, and every subtle change in what happened in the rhythms of the natural world. For the last 150 years or so, it's kind of been a different story. We've been sort of conquering, trashing, ignoring, subduing, and mostly trying to escape from the natural world. But the good news I want to bring you this evening is that there's an awful lot going on to turn that around. It looks like we're finally beginning to live within the rhythms of the natural world. And this kind of work is going on in every sector of society. And as was indicated, most of it falls under this umbrella of sustainability. We can look, for instance, in the realm of business. There we go. Walmart, the home of what we call cheap plastic crap, is actually a huge leader in sustainability. They have 3 aspirational goals: to create zero waste, to be powered 100% by renewable energy, and to sell only sustainable products. It's really quite impressive. You may also be surprised to learn that the Department of Defense has gotten in on the act. They have a strategic sustainability performance plan put out in fiscal year 2012. Let's not forget the realm of religion. Here, the Catholic Climate Covenant is an excellent example. Their slogan, care for creation, care for the poor. There's a related initiative I like to talk about. You know, you've seen the bumper stickers that say, what would Jesus do? Well, it's a variation on that. It says, what would Jesus drive? Okay, it's a moral, the slogan here is, transportation is a moral issue, okay? The Pope recently, Pope Francis, who we all love, recently got in on the act. He's been encouraging priests to drive more smaller energy efficiency cars that are, give a more humble sense. The Pope himself drives around in a Ford Focus, which gets 27 city, 37 highway, pretty good. So the Pope drives a Ford Focus. What Jesus drives, we're still wondering. I want to tell you, though, that it has even gone into the realm of recreation. And if you go to Colorado, don't panic, it's organic. You can actually buy USD organic weed, all right? But what I want to talk about this evening is not marijuana, it's education. This is really my specialty. In the realm of K through 12 education, sustainability has really gotten a foothold. The university, for instance, in 2006, they started the American College and University President's Climate Commitment. Since 2006, nearly 700 institutions have signed on to this. When people sign on to this pledge, they pledge to do 2 things. One, to create a plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions at the institution, and to educate all students about sustainability and the challenges of climate change, all right? So there really is a tremendous amount going on in the world today about sustainability, and it does look like we're finally getting our green groove on. Well, I wish we could stop there because I'm getting cotton mouth, but we have to go on because there's actually a different story that's happening in this. And this is where we're going to go into the bad news for a while, so be warned, but we'll come out, I promise. There's another reality out there, all right? And it happens, I wake up to it, I read an article, I see a TED Talk, I see a movie, I read a book, and I'm beginning this sentence like waking up in the movie The Matrix. Lots of movie references this evening. It's like there's a sudden reality that we've been missing. All right? And when I wake up to that, and maybe this experience has happened to you, I wonder about the young people who are in school now. All right? If you're in kindergarten up to college right now, in the year 2050, you're going to be in your 40s or 50s. So in a sense, the prime of your life. What is the world going to be like in 2050? Are we preparing you well to live in that world? All right? That's the challenge. So what is the world going to look like in 2050? Well, here's a little population chart that gives it out. When I was born, there were a little more than 3 billion people on the planet. In my lifetime, the population has doubled. It will go up again to 9 billion or plus, almost certainly by 2050. Now, some people are not worried about this because they say, well, it's kind of, going to level out. It won't be so bad. But the problem is, and this is a really sustainability issue, the problem is the vast majority of those people want to live like us. They want to live like us. And if you don't think you're wealthy, you're mistaken. This is a consumption cartogram. It's a little old now, but I use it because it tells a really important story. Us members, citizens of the United States, about 318 million people, we constitute about 5% of the total global population, all right? And yet we consume roughly 30% of the total global resources. You see where we're going with this? You can see South Korea, Japan, Western Europe, and parts of the Middle East. They're doing this. The issue is that everybody in China, everybody in India, Latin America, Africa, they'd love to be able to live like us. That's their model of development. But what's the problem? Here's the truth. If everybody on the planet lived like me, I really care about this stuff. If everybody lived like me, we'd need 4, maybe 5 more planets to produce the resources and absorb the waste, all right? That is impossible. So what does this mean? It means we've been involved in a sort of planetary Ponzi scheme, sort of a planetary pyramid scheme. It's just not going to work out. Of course, all of this production and consumption has impacts in the atmosphere. We've been hearing a lot about climate change, but the reality is a lot of people think it's a snoozer. I could put up so many charts and graphs and scary statistics, and it would be still a snoozer for people. But let me see if I can give a sense of urgency. 2 days ago, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, one of the most august scientific bodies on the planet, put out a report. They were not trying to add new knowledge to the field. They were trying to say, look, the knowledge is there. The research is in. This is what's going on. We need to wake up. All right, so this happened on Tuesday. It's going to be followed up by an unprecedented campaign to try to communicate the serious findings of the scientific community to the public at large who don't understand the urgency of the question. So that's the concern. If we don't do anything, we're going to see more of this, of course. This is Long Island after Superstorm Sandy. Now, Sandy, short for Cassandra. If you know your Greek mythology, Cassandra had the gift of prophecy. She could see the future, but she was also cursed. Cursed because no one would believe her. Now, many of the scientists, of course, who are operating these days think, yeah, this is Cassandra all over again. Nobody's believing us, what we're saying about what is coming down the pike. So this is the real concern. Well, one reason it's hard to sort of not believe is because, or hard to believe, excuse me, is that when you go outside today, it's a beautiful day, it just doesn't look like anything is terribly wrong. The planet seems fine. To us it does, in a sense, because we are relatively wealthy people who can live in a kind of a bubble and protect ourselves from the worst impacts. If you're a poor person in the world, you cannot protect yourself from the worst impacts of climate change and everything else. But let me tell you, if you're a species other than a human on this planet, these are very dire times for you. Our increasing population, our consumptive habits, and what we're doing to the climate has had terrible impacts on other species on this planet. So much so that scientists are now telling us that we are experiencing the 6th mass extinction on the planet. All right, Elizabeth Kolbert came out with a book just recently called The Sixth Extinction. What does this mean? It means by the year 2050, the extinction rates could go up 10 times of what they are now. And what they are now is about 1,000 times the background rate, all right? That is losing a tremendous number of species that we depend on, in a sense, for the health of the ecosystem. And if you think this can't happen, notice the number. Extinctions are relatively common on this planet. The last one was about 65 million years ago. It was an asteroid, hit the Yucatan, ruined spring break for all the dinosaurs hanging out at Cancun. They recovered. But this time, it's an asteroid, all right? It's human caused. There is no other way to look at it. So this is the future. This is the bad news that young people have to face today. 2050 is not looking particularly good, if you know what I mean. In the work that I do, when I wake up and see this, I see this enormous gap between the most serious challenges and even my best work. Lots of people are doing tremendous work, and I don't want to minimize that, but we have to understand that it's not doing the job, all right? And so it has really changed my understanding of what we mean by educating for sustainability. And so now when I think about educating for sustainability, I have a different approach, and it starts to look like this. Here's where we are, all right? It may look like Jersey Shore or something, but it's not. Okay, this is bad. So we're on this civilizational train, and we're chugging along, and science tells us if you keep going in this direction, we know exactly where we're headed, into chaos, all right? Meanwhile, we're adding lots of people to the train, more and more on every day. And those of us who are interested in sustainability are busy greening the train, all right? We're eating organic food on the train. We're making organic hemp seat covers for the train. We'll put a green roof on the train. We'll insulate it. We'll put double pane windows on the train. We'll smoke organic weed on the train. You know, all of this stuff's going on. What's the problem? We're still on the train, and it's still heading in this direction. And the worst part is pretty much it's accelerating. We may have slowed the acceleration somewhat, but we're still headed in that direction, all right? So what's going on here? Well, one thing is what we're doing is making a system that is unsustainable somewhat less unsustainable. We've heard the expression, we need to make something more sustainable. Something can never be more sustainable. It either is or it isn't. You're pregnant or you're not. It's sustainable or it's not, all right? So in this case, it's less unsustainability isn't going to cut the cake. It also means we've misunderstood the nature of the challenge. We thought sustainability was a normal problem. We could pass some laws, do some education, invent a few gizmos, sell them at Walmart, we'll be fine. That's not going to cut it, all right? So this is what we have to face. Now, some people might think, well, you know, what's the next chapter? Well, one possibility is that the next chapter is BAU, business as usual. And we continue on this track until the wake-up signs from the natural world become so loud and so devastating that we will have no choice but to radically change our society, the way we live, and most particularly how we think. But of course, by then it will be pretty much too late because the world will have been plunged into chaos, all right? And that's not a future we want. So what's the alternative? If we don't want business as usual in a chaotic future, what can we do? Well, one thing we can do is stop thinking about probability, like what's the probability we're going to have a massive disaster in the near future, and think about possibility, all right? What's the possibility if we go in a different direction? What are the desirable futures that we could imagine and create, all right? We can do that, but that's not going to come from giving people more charts and graphs and facts and figures. That's what the environmental community has been doing since the last century, and it hasn't done much good because they're pretty much just put us to sleep. We need powerful transformative experiences, and there are good examples to emulate of what this might look like. This is the Space Shuttle Atlantis overlooking the planet. There's something called the overview effect. Described in a book by Frank White, where he interviewed astronauts and cosmonauts who had the privilege of going into space. And so many of them recount experiencing this mind-blowing thing. They were trained to go up and do scientific stuff, you know, military types of short haircuts and stuff. They're not like woo-woos. And they go up and they have these mind-blowing experiences because they suddenly see, not a picture, but the reality of our Earth, you know, hanging there in the void. There are no boundaries between countries that you see from space. The petty disagreements we have between countries look sort of ridiculous. And they get this sudden feeling that, you know, we need to be pulling together to create a planetary civilization united in protecting our one home. Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock are not coming to save us. This is it. This is the only home we've got. One astronaut, Edgar Mitchell, when he went to the moon, looked back and he said, you develop an instant global consciousness, a people orientation, a profound dissatisfaction with the state of the planet, and a compulsion to do something about it. That's not from new knowledge or research. That's from having a powerful experience. Now, those kinds of experiences can help us make a big change in the planet, but there are certainly obstacles. One of them is our understanding of the way education happens. I'm a professor of education. I deal with this stuff all the time. The assumption on the street is this is education. It happens indoors, in classrooms, in rows, facing front, lots of Ritalin and Adderall, and that's how we do education, all right? This is not a prescription for transformation. This is not a prescription for preparing people to deal with an incredibly uncertain future, all right? We need to go off and do something else. Well, you know, what's that going to be? Well, the other obstacle has to do with attention, all right? Amory Lovins, the famous environmental pioneer, was often asked, you know, what's the most important thing we can be doing? He said, 2 words. Pay attention. Pay attention. Why is this so important? Because as you know, if you're at all paying attention, we live in a culture that is absolutely addicted to distraction. You know what I'm talking about? We are the species on the planet endowed with a capacity for profound awareness. And we've created a culture that nourishes what? Distraction, not our attention. All right? So how do we create a culture that nourishes something? Well, if we haven't been noticing what's going on the planet, it's because we're on that train, all right? We're in the first class car. The curtains are drawn. We've got a flat screen TV. We've got a cell phone. We've got YouTube. We've got Miley Cyrus, Justin Bieber, NCAA March Madness, and everything else that constitutes the entrancing rhythms of our modern culture. The entrancing rhythms of our modern culture. That's what we need to wake up from. The rest of the world's outside, like saying, yo, we're out here. Pay attention. There's stuff going on, all right? But we're so wrapped up in our own stuff. So if we can wake up from that, then we get to do the relatively fun creative stuff. And what's that? Well, first one is we do an extreme makeover of sustainability, right? Sustainability is it's like white toast. Nothing going on there. I got married last year. Hi, Susan. And people ask me, how's married life? What would people think if I said, it's so sustainable? It's like, it doesn't capture the joy, the beauty, and the love, all right? So we need something. We need an alternative that can actually go up and be a competitor to the prevailing vision that's operating now in our society. You may be wondering, well, what is that vision of the future that we are moving toward? Well, we all have one in our heads. And through our actions every day, we bring a vision into reality, all right? You may think you don't have it. It's usually just called progress. But progress is an incomplete idea. If we say progress, we have to say progressing toward something. Well, what are we progressing toward? Well, I love to do this with an audience because we say, well, what's the future got to look like? How do we know when we get there? What symbolizes it? What's it going to be? And always people come up with the same answer: flying cars. All right? We know we will have arrived in the future when we have flying cars. But it's funny, it's hilarious. It's the Jetsons. It really is the Jetsons. But it's also extremely real because that's what's operating in our heads. We think that's utopia. It's the Jetsons. But think about what the Jetsons was. They have total control of nature. You don't even see the planet. It's white people flying around in cars, because we got to have those. World with no trees, eating food out of machines. All right? That's our future. Well, it could be worse than that, because the future that we're probably actually headed toward, if you want to use another movie reference, is the world of Blade Runner. That old movie with Harrison Ford. In that movie, Harrison Ford paints a world where, yes, of course, we have flying cars because we seem to insist on them. But it was also a world of social and ecological chaos. That's the world we're rapidly moving toward. It's going to be full of high-tech stuff, but there won't be a decent planet to put it on, all right? So obviously, we need to do something creative. This is the opportunity. The future vision I envision is one where at least some outlines. At least we are going to be emphasizing being more, not buying more. We're going to emphasize really making people happy, not making people hard workers who then we have to feed pills to make them happy. You know what I'm talking about? Yes. And so I also think it's going to be a world in which we rediscover the universe. We live in this incredible cosmos, 13.7 billion years old. We live on a planet with millions of other species. And we're so wrapped up in our own stuff, it means we've had small lives. We're actually very lonely people because we don't have much connection with the rest of the world or even the rest of the cosmos, all right? So as you can see, we really need to do something else. Writer Daniel Quinn says, the extraordinary thing that's going to happen in the next decade or two is that we're going to have a second great renaissance. Nothing less than that is going to save us, all right? So as you can see, my understanding of educating for sustainability is really not about helping people recycle more, or compost, or buy the right car, or change the light bulbs. While all of those things are important, it's primarily about helping all of us wake up from the entrancing rhythms of industrial life so that we can all jump in and catalyze a new renaissance for our future children and grandchildren, all right? It's an exciting time to be alive. It's an extraordinary opportunity. I hope we can do it. Thank you and happy spring. Mm-hmm.